Hi, it's Mark from the Digging Deep podcast. Just a quick one before we get started. Over the past few weeks, we've had more than 15,000 views and listens across the podcast, which is brilliant. So first of all, thank you. But what we are seeing is that a lot of people are watching and listening and not subscribing. So if you are enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. It makes a big difference and helps us keep growing, bringing in great guests and improving the show each week. Also, give us a follow on social to keep up with everything we've got going on. Right, let's get on with this week's episode. Hello.
Hello.
You there? Happy days. Back for part 2 of our report. We'll get into some debate, but, you know, how you been since we last seen each other? What's been doing you nutting?
Well, I can start off by saying thanks, obviously, for having me back on the podcast. I've had some great reviews, and it's amazing, you know, how far you guys are reaching across the industry. The first thing though that's doing me head in is definitely it adds £10 onto your weight. This screen. So if you do see me online, it definitely makes you fatter than what you are. So I've tried to wear a yellow that makes me more compressing all over. And also thank you to Charlie for getting me off the subs bench to come in and letting me take part in this fantastic podcast all about the report that you guys have produced. But the thing that's really doing my head in this week, and I don't know why it happens, so if anyone out there wants to drop in, send us an email, a text, or a message, flies buzzing around in my front room. Zzz, 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 in a pattern. Zzz, 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 zzz. They don't move anywhere else. They just buzz round, and then they're joined by a friend, and then another friend. Now, I know they say flies hang around shit. I don't think I'm living in a shithole, but I want to know why they're buzzing round constantly around the light.
You want to know?
Sorry, you weren't expecting that, were you? But no, flies is the thing that's doing my head in this week. Continually buzzing around my front room, annoying me.
Isn't it a mating thing?
I don't know. Is it?
What about the flies?
Yeah, not talking about me and what I do in my front room.
You should know something about that, Mark. I mean, you got a stat on everything, didn't you?
I should have a stat on that, yeah. I don't think I should discuss Liam's private life on the pod.
Liam, I'll tell you, I can answer that question. But those people might disagree with me. It's definitely it's a territory mating ritual, performed almost entirely by male houseflies.
Right.
Did you know that?
Maggot infestation is what we're
They
saying.
pick a landmark. They like a light fitting.
Right.
Normally around the light, yeah. They pick a landmark and they do that as a territory thing, and then they patrol the boundaries, and they scare off any rivals that are coming through. So normally you get one come in and they have a little bit of a, and then the other one goes off.
Skirmish.
So is it the equivalent of that fight you saw at the train station last week? But with flies?
Well, that looked alcohol induced. You know, the trouble is with the World Cup being at 10 o'clock at night, is people are going out at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, aren't they? And they're plotting themselves up, thinking we've got to get a nice seat, we'll have some lunch and a few drinks, and before you know it. But as we know, all as humans, you know, and we've got friends, some of them can't even make it past 4 or 5 pints, never mind when we get on to 10, 12 pints. I mean, and they're fighting themselves. Most of it's fighting between people that know each other, brothers and sisters, isn't it? Or the worst thing is women. I see a fight the other week in the train station with 2 women. England scarfed up. So obviously the world has changed. Women like to have the dust up just as much as men nowadays. But if that's what's doing your head in, I've just told you, they're trying to shag, basically, them in your front room. So the best cure for that, have you seen them tennis rackets with the electric?
Yeah.
Yeah, get one of them. I got one of them and I just bat them away. And it's nice to hear them go zzz, and fucking gone.
You've got Wii tennis in your front room.
Yeah. The only thing is that actually involves me having to get up off of my arse and move about.
Yeah, it's a bit of exercise. Once you killed 1 or 2, they won't come back. What about you, Mark? Anything like done your nutting this week?
Yeah, do you know what? Right, what is it with like hotels? Yeah, you stay in an hotel, and you get up in the morning, or even maybe the evening before you go down for your meal, and you get the shower, and you got to almost, because there's no indicator, you got to estimate where the old fucking bar goes to get there, and you think, just want to, I don't want a hot shower, just like, in this weather, like a warm one I do at this stage, and you just get it on the. And you put your hand in, it's scalding. It's like putting your hand under a freshly boiled kettle, and then you just move it 1 millimetre to the left. You think, I'll just give that a little 1 millimetre to the left. And it's like David Attenborough's in the Antarctic. It's like, I'm surprised they got stalactites and stalagmites coming out of the water. And you think, what the? And you can't. And even if you do get it right, this is the other thing. You're in there like that, and you think, lovely jubbly, and then somebody on another floor is obviously showering at the same time, because it suddenly goes like this, doesn't it? Like, right, and it's either too hot or too cold, and then you're doing the millimetre thing. I spend more time doing the dial. I feel like I'm old school, trying to do some Morse code on the old yeah, trying to hot cold.
You in hotels, mate. You in hotels and travel all over. I think, I mean, in actual fact, that rather than what's doing me head in, I think that what could be an alternative to doing your head in, because what does do me head in was the amount of home and away travel with so and so going around the block. Loads of celebrities basically going fingers up to you. Look, we're away on this lovely fucking holiday. You're watching us on telly, and we're on this, and every week there's a different travel program or a different cookery program. The decent one on there was them two girl comedians. I don't know if you've seen it. You can get it on. I'm not doing an advert here, but I think it's on TLC, and therefore Discovery Plus is there. I think it's called One Star, where they go and travel to everything that's had 1 star on the thing. And I think, Mark, you should do that. I think we should do a travel program with Mark, because you book holidays that get cancelled. You book holidays then that you misbook for a year later. You then, by mistake, you think you're going next week and you've actually booked it for a year later. Then you book somewhere when they've got an LGBT big fucking festival going on and you're right in the middle of it. Then you can't get a shower. Then you book a hotel room in London that turns out it's not a hotel room at all. It's like a pod, and like you can't move in it. And there's like a 3-foot bed, no windows. I mean, there's a book and definitely a travel series in How Not to Fuck Your Holiday Up by Mark Scutt.
Definitely, you could then rate the avocado on toast at all these different places.
Yeah. How many people do a decent avocado on toast?
I'll tell you what, that is the irony, isn't it? I come out of my windowless pod downstairs and expect avocados on toast. Maybe I got the wrong sort of idea.
Unbelievable. You are the most unluckiest man with holidays.
I actually agree with that.
And marriages, of course. So don't forget marriages.
Yeah. Do you know what?
So maybe you could add that to the travel program. Where not to go on honeymoon.
What? Because it could end up a disaster.
No, because you know so many places. You've probably been on so many honeymoons. For those listeners who don't know, Mark's nickname is Ross from Friends. But the amount of
I'm scared to tell people, right? Some people go. The guy next door said, he's just got back from New York. He said, have you been to New York? I went, yeah, I went to New York back in 2007, which I did, right? But what I left out was that was a honeymoon. That was part of a honeymoon.
Yeah, because you do that every other trip, wouldn't you?
Well,
You'd
the
be saying
problem I've
that.
got is I've been to more places on honeymoon than I have just on holiday.
Dear me. There's definitely a book somewhere, Anyway, look, what we were talking about, part 2, we're going to get in some detail. We're going to get into some detail, no doubts. So, last week we talked about why we did the report. We talked about, why we believe some of these companies were showing real bad performance and stuff like that. And we can get into some of the whys and wish for now. So, let's start with the industry itself. We'll all work in plant hire, so sometimes it's easy to forget how significant this sector really is. I mean, it's a big. I'll do a little bit of yours as a build-up, Mark, a little bit what you would normally do, but the report reminds us that we're talking about an industry worth, between 5.8 and 7 billion. There's an argument there, but our report's showing around about 5.8 billion, employing more than 80,000 people across 5,000 businesses. And I'm not talking about splinters of that. We're not talking about all the supply chain that's affected by hire and rental, and the contractors, obviously, and stuff like that. So this is a major contributor to the UK construction infrastructure and economic growth. But despite its size, it's also one of the most capital intense and financially demanding industries there. It's a real bun fight, in other words. Every machine costs money, whether it's earning or not. I know you touched on that last week, Mark. Every depot has its overheads, every transport movement, workshop repair, insurance policy and finance agreement eats into margin. So, Marky, let's start with you. Let's set the scene for us. Just how difficult has the industry become?
Look, the industry's become really difficult, and I've got a few stats on here regarding some information on the report, on the information on the companies that we were dealing with. Just give me 2 seconds while I scroll. I've actually lost it now. Can you believe this? Look, so basically, the report reminds us that we've got an industry worth 5.8 billion, right? This is employing more than 80,000 people across 5,000 businesses. It's become really difficult, because I think one of the things that we discussed on the last pod was it's the ability to adapt. And as Liam quite rightly said before last week, companies that were on top 10 years ago aren't on top anymore now. Profitability is a major factor. The ability to adapt to the market and find yourself a niche or niches to find different streams of revenue is absolute key to what needs to happen now.
So basically, Mark, you were saying that we talked about the stats there. So so for 5,000 hire businesses, 80,000 people roughly, and we was just about to talk about the price. I think I mentioned 150 or 200,000 pound excavator costing about 30 or 40 grand every year before it starts earning any revenue, and you might have some other facts and figures.
Right, so look, from the report, the industry at a glance, 12 major plant hire businesses benchmarked, 2.6 billion combined revenue, 5 different business models analysed, 8 executive business reviews, 10 structural industry trends, 14 debate questions explored, and 3 years of financial comparisons. And what we've got here is we've got 4,500 businesses operate in the UK. What we've seen is 65% of those major projects now choose hire rather than ownership. 650 billion UK infrastructure pipeline is expected over the next decade. Now, the standout statistics are this. Gap Group got the highest PBT margin at 12.1%. Greco, the highest PHPI score of 88 out of 100. Flannery, as we said before, 448 million committed to its fleet investment. Lynch scored the highest benchmark PBT margin with 15.9% with a 44% gross margin. The numbers tell the story. The specialists are averaging 10.4 PBT, 14.7 ROCE. The generalists are averaging minus 0.2% PBT and 0.4% ROCE. If you look at the family-owned independents, they're at 11.7% PBT margin and 15.5% ROCE. As I've mentioned before, utilisation 60 to 70% is the break-even point. The best operators are achieving 85% plus.
Yeah, well, and you can see on that table in the report, you know, where some of those big guys at the are really, they're in that stressed zone. You know, Speedy, HSS, Ardent, and Mixed. You know, again, they've gone more specialist, but perhaps they've got rid of their plant and they've done the right thing in theory. They focused just on that telehandler market, and maybe they're in that transitional period. Do you think? But the independents like Morris Leslie and Nixon are quite strong, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, it shows a clear win there, doesn't it? It shows that Gaps just rose straight to the top. Then, you know, compared to the likes of Speedy and Sunbelt, they're nowhere near the size, nowhere near the fleet size, nowhere near the depot coverage. But, you know, the key lesson from that report is, as you mentioned, Mark, is profit, profit, profit. Biggest isn't always best.
No. Well, look, I mean, if you look at the report, if we go through that report, UK plant hire market, as we were saying before we get on to some other bits, you know, there seems to be the standout, you know, first of all, one of the things we want to do is where the future growth in the UK market will come from. And it's concentrated in what we believe is 9 opportunities with infrastructure investment and energy transition, the largest structural demand drivers in a generation. The business best placed to capture them combines specialist capability, compliance depth, and the capital to invest ahead of the workload. That's where it stands out for us on the thing. So UK infrastructure investment, HS2, national highways, water, infrastructure. That's what we're talking about. Flood defence, rail, and digital. You know, and digital is those data centres and bits and pieces like that. £650 billion pipeline there. Energy transition, offshore wind, solar, battery storage, hydrogen. We talk about all these things all the time. You know, the investment required for specialist lifting access and construction plant at scale. A Greco power business is an early template for what's to come, really. And then you've got the utilities, you know, AMP8. Water companies have invested 60 billion under AMP8 to upgrade infrastructure. It's a 5 years worth of sustained programme funded higher demand for groundwork and civil plant. So anyone listening, you know, if you're in the plant industry, there's some real facts and data in this report. Artificial intelligence, we talked about it. AI powered demand forecasting. You know, dramatic pricing and fleet optimisation can improve the utilisation by 5 to 8% on points. It's about what you said earlier. It's about machinery that's standing still. What are they doing with it? Early adopters are compounding this advantage right now. People are into the data. You know, people are into the machine data and the analytics. ESG reporting is a big one. Carbon data, utilisation. All the big contractors have got to go by an ESG schedule and structure. So anyone creating revenue streams from machine data is becoming as valuable as the machine. So you've got 2 revenue streams there, in my opinion. And it's just about getting on with it. The clever boys, the Lynches and the Flannerys are doing this. You know, managed fleet services, that seems to be like a medium type scale up, you know, where tier 1 contractors increasingly prefer single managed service for plant and their products and their projects. The independents can do this. It doesn't mean it has to be the bigger guys that do it. There's independent companies out there that've got their hire desks that are doing a one-stop shop. And the specialisms, if you're doing something niche, is where there's a real opportunity. You know, getting bigger margins of 12% and over for, you know, over the more than the generalists, as you named them, Mark. You know, and having a digital customer experience. I think you've got to add that into your remit. If you're a hire company, how can you make it easier for the customer, even if you're a small company? And AI is helping you do that now. And hopefully between 26 and 28 there's a planning reform, the government house building targets. They're trying to do something now. They're talking about getting rid of, I don't know if you heard on the news, but hopefully it does it, doing some kind of freeze or some kind of discount on stamp duty, which should stir it up. So they're my 9 areas of where the growth will come. And as we said already, infrastructure pipeline, 650. If you take 3 of those opportunities, 650 billion. AI technology, get into it. And niche. So that's where I've come from on the report side there. So why don't we get into have a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, maybe?
Yeah. So if I have a look
So
at
back. Yeah, so I was thinking about let's have a look at a couple. I mean, we look at if you go to the report, and we go to the first one, which is probably page 26, is Aggreko. They're scoring in our scoring structure 88 out of 100. The revenue, it's a global revenue, 2.85 billion. So yeah, you could turn around and say, well, it's not on the same playing field, but they are a rental business. The profit before tax, was 329 million. The EBITDA, the margin 1.1, and their revenue trend seems to have increased from 22, 23 up to 24. Their strengths seem to be a global scale with 200 plus locations. Their weakness, if we have a look at it, is because they're global. So US figures reduce direct UK comparability, but private ownership limits transparency of UK specific performance. But that's what the report's pulled out. I don't necessarily agree with said about independent private ownerships. The only threats that we could see with that kind of niche market was performance of energy infrastructure, reducing temporary solution demand, currency risk, across the countries they're dealing with, and large engineering contracts carry significant execution risk. And I'm not trying to take over. I'm just trying to give people a flavour of the report. But have you guys got the report up in front of you?
Yeah, I've got the report right in front of us now. Yep.
Yeah. So if we go down to page maybe, let's not just. Yeah, let's go straight to the one that we were talking about, page 36. Speedy. Do you want to have a read through of that?
Yeah. Look, let's have a look at this now. See this.
46 out of 100.
Yeah, really low. But it's if you actually look at all of the statistics, if you look at all of the data, it's all in a bad way. The only thing that's in the basically in the medium level is innovation, market position, and customer proposition, and that's all done by marketing, isn't it? If you look at the weaknesses, minus 32.3 profit before tax, leverage 3.3 EBITDA. And it says that one of the biggest weaknesses is like you said before, Mark, a broad model complexity supporting thousands of product lines across 200 locations. So is it too many products, too many locations? Is that the problem?
Well, they would say, Speedy will come out and they would say that there's some purchases and bits and pieces and business restructure and stuff like that. But even that, there's a £10 million operating loss out of the 32. So even when you take into a lot of the jiggery pokery that's going on within the company, there still seems to be there's still an operating loss. There's still something there's major problems within that business. And it's not the only year, is it? The last results that they produced went ahead with, I think, a 10 million loss last year and a 20 million write-off, therefore loss from the year before when they had to write off a load of product. There was a black hole with product, wasn't there, from their Middle Eastern business or some such, whatever was going on. But yeah, so lots of detail in that report there, a lot of detail covering in-depth, I think, analysis of where you're going. If you're an independent and you want to look at the right way to run your business, I think there is some extra added value here in the report to give you that kind of not starting point. As I said, we're not here to show you how to make money, but it gives us a bit of a question, doesn't it, to put ourselves up against. So it's all fascinating. There's lots of information there. We can go into more depth about what we're trying to do there. But which company, guys? Ask you a couple of questions here. We'll get back on track now. Which company surprised you the most? Good or bad? Was you surprised your old company Lynch was up there? Was you pleased?
There was a few surprises, and I know I keep mentioning it. The biggest surprise for me was indeed Gap, because I didn't actually realise how well engineered that company is in terms of their finances. They really are in great shape, and I didn't think for a minute they were number one.
Well, again, we're going back to what? Really a family independent business, aren't we? A good type company. They've kept control of the same family. A bit like Nixon's in a way, performing really well. And then you could turn around and say, well, equally as good as Lynch and Flannery in that way, aren't they? There's a common denominator there, isn't there? They're all controlled quite tightly, still with the same family network that originally, within the same family, yeah, that originally started the businesses. Did any company disappoint you? Or surprise you? Disappoint is probably a strong word, isn't it? But
I was really surprised with. I know we just spoke about them. I was really surprised with Speedy, to be honest, because I grew up, if you like, I grew up with Speedy around me, and they're a big national. They do the power, they do the tools, they do so many products, and I just thought, they're on every major project as well, aren't they? Yeah, I just didn't realise they were having a tough time as they are.
yeah, but this is it. I mean, they've got all the capabilities. I think they can offer you. I mean, and unfortunately, that's the problem, isn't it? Our buyers. I mean, maybe this is a question for Liam, because let's say we're going to set up a site tomorrow. Does the brain automatically go, oh, Sunbelt can cover everything? Or do we actually research the area in the region that thinking there's an independent that could give me an on-site facility just and create just as good service? So where this is where I think the listeners would be interested in your opinion, because you're on the ground level there. If you're looking at someone who's spent years working around equipment and customers, when you see businesses with smaller revenues outperforming much bigger organisations, then does that surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two folds there to the question that you've posed. The first one is from a contractor basis, and working nationally. We do have a couple of companies within our supply chain list that we like to use nationally, and we do have a relationship with, and you get that continuity throughout. However, there are certain regions, we all know, where certain companies will struggle operationally to deliver, whether that be transport, whether that be operators, or just having the right equipment at the right time. I mean, one of the biggest things for me is always honesty is the best policy. So if you don't particularly have a product in stock, I rather know about it, and rather than the crossfire of a crossfire and it's come from ending up being a local supplier that's just down the road. And actually, you find if you go to them direct, you could save yourself a hell of a lot on the transport and the weekly hire rate, because they are local and in that neck of the woods. I think that it's got to be done on a case by case basis. I did a project just recently down in the southwest. We were after some large bits of operated plant and equipment. Went to the regional player, shall we say, that's known down there. Wasn't able to facilitate or help us. Ended up going to a smaller organisation just based outside of Bristol. Gave us the quote. Wasn't necessarily as cheap as the regional player, but we needed to deliver the work. And so we went with them. But actually, what we did find, surprisingly, is that yes, weren't the cheapest, but when they were on site, the plant and equipment had been maintained and was at a good standard, was in the less than a 18-month threshold. The operators were knowledgeable of the area and the region that we were working in and were quite skilled. And in fact, two of the guys that we had also previously worked on the site. So they've got that knowledge, which again is a blessing. So I think on the first part of the question is yes, it is all on a case-by-case basis, depending on where you're working. Whilst it is nice to say that you've got a national that can cover nationally, it isn't always the case. And actually, sometimes you have to look at it at a more localised level. And while you might be paying a little bit more up front, you certainly are maybe gaining that back with the service backup, reliability, and product and operators that you could be getting.
Yeah.
Your second part of the question is that, again, for me, it is surprising that some of those figures have come out, and as I say, those that you think are the ones that you would be leading from the front. I remember a company growing up that was everywhere, big, bright machinery and all of that. But I think one of the points that I would make is as well, it's probably, and again, I think we've touched on it just a few moments ago, it's that perception within the businesses. And, you've spoken about being family owned and family driven, and those from the original startup, if you like, and still having a hold and got control of the reins. I also think it's to do with, is there the appetite? Is there still a hunger within that business? So if you look at some of those businesses potentially that have been bought out by other businesses and they get merged and amalgamated, and they almost lose their identity in some ways. And then, is there an appetite from a board of directors that could be sitting over in Europe or over in the States to have that passion and that drive to deliver as much as, previously done by the company when it was independently owned or family run? So, I think there is a common denominator and a trend that follows through when you're looking at those businesses.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there when you said about the amalgamation of companies and how they've lost that skill set, and what from what you're saying is like, and I agree, it kind of is the trend should be that you should be, say, brilliant at 5 things and than average at 55 things, if you know. And what we've seen definitely with some of these larger companies, they've bought up other businesses, and you don't forget that Speedy bought Hewden's tools before Hewden's went bust many years ago, and how many of those depots did they shut, and what kind of a purchase was that? Why did it, just to take him out the industry, because it hasn't made them a better hire company by amalgamating Hewden's tools into Speedy tools. That's for sure.
Do you know, Mark, that was the thing as well, which I think you touched on in part one of this whole special in relation to the industry and this report and what it's produced, is that if you look at some of my experiences and when we worked together, sometimes just because you go and open up a depot in, A, B, C and D, but it's all still just feeding off of London, but the revenue isn't going up, and actually all you're doing is increasing your overhead, all of a sudden the profit's going down. So again, why would you want, for a small tools or hire business, depots all within 3-4 miles of each other, all competing for the same work? We've already spoken about the margins or lack of margins within that work, and then having all that overhead and all that cost. You're much better. And again, we've seen some of these businesses where they've gone to a bit more of a regional centre, that they say, look, we cover the southwest, we cover the Midlands, we cover the north, and running the lorries, but finding a much more economical, much more viable business model to survive, rather than having, I say, everybody clambering over each other for that same revenue and turnover within a very tight field that you're operating in. So I think, again, that's got a big part to play, because if you look at Hewden's, when I was an operator on the road, I was, particularly in London, I was always driving past a Hewden's depot. There was always, there's a Hewden's, there's a Hewden's, there's a Hewden's. Take HSS, there's a HSS shop, there's a HSS shop. There was always depots that you were passing by, but were they making the money? Well, clearly, they weren't. They were struggling, as I say, and with the evolvement of the industry as well, it's all married up into, some might say their slight downfall on their market position of where they're sitting at the minute.
Yeah, and carrying on from what you've said there, very valid points. On page 41, you've mentioned that clarity on what, and really what you're getting from that hire company. When you look at page 41 of the report, you've got companies like, let's go down the bottom there, you've got companies like Ardent. Now, Ardent obviously are making that transition, so we're going to give them a bit, this isn't about criticism here, but we know that Ardent last year decided that plant was not for them. They were going to go back into, and for those that don't understand what Ardent traditionally were a plant hire business that were bought and they amalgamated with a telehandler business. Those very successful businesses merged together, were bought by a consortium and failed basically, and struggled for years to get that consistency right, where to run the business, how many depots, and they were doing okay. But sensibly, somebody at the top there has gone, look, what was our real profitability part? What do we understand? Maybe that makes the other thing. Maybe they've looked at it and they've said, what's the clarity here? What's our skill set within our business? They've gone with telehandlers. They've got rid of the plant. So there's probably a transitional period there. So they're not in the shit. They're just showing like the growth outlook doesn't look good, and at the moment the profitability is on the medium section. But when you look at people like HSS and Speedy and what's going on, and Speedy have bought this part of HSS have bought this, and there's amalgamation. What's coming out of the statistics here and how we've scored it is that there's a real low strategic focus and a real low model clarity. There's nowhere that shows within their marketing or anything else where their direction's going. And if nobody outside knows, then how do people inside know? That's my argument. And that's perhaps why they're down the bottom, Speedy and HSS, two traditionally high-end businesses in our industry that we know very well, don't we? And it just shows that jack of all trades that you mentioned there, it seems to be some of the problem, and perhaps they need to get more focused on getting back to what they were really good at, whatever that might be. And it sounds like we're having a go, but we're not. So moving on slightly, let's throw something out there. Imagine you're buying a hire business tomorrow and you've got two options. This is an obvious one, but we're just having a chat. 500 million turnover, huge fleet, national network, struggling financially. Would you fancy something like that? I might. Or company B, 120 turnover, strong margins, healthy balance sheet. Which business are you buying at the moment?
I'd choose the 150 million business every day of the week, because it's impressed to beat a 500 million pound turnover, but at a 2% margin, you're making 10 million. 150 million pound business at 15% margin makes 22.5 million, more than twice the profit with less than a third of the turnover. So that probably means less complexity, less operational risk, more cash to invest. Turnover, the thing is, turnover looks good in headline, but profit and return on capital are what build a sustainable business.
And I think, just to add to what Mark's saying there, we are all in business, let's have it right, to earn a profit. We're not charities. We're not here for all the stress and the headaches of, being in, positions in management and director level, for fun. We are there to make money and to make profit, and that's why we go to work. So I think, as you say, all day long, you want to be the one where you're making the most amount of profit.
So we're saying that maybe scale is overrated. I mean, we always talk about you've got to grow. But if you're making decent profit every year, I mean, isn't that what it's about? Does the growth, do you think, create some kind of complexity?
I think it is a little bit overrated. Now, I wonder if it's not overrated. I'll tell you what I think. I worry that growth has become a fashionable idea in our industry. Yeah, it seems to be success is measured on growth. Success is measured on how many depots have we got, or how many niches we've got within our business. And I think the trouble is, you've got to go back to fundamental basics. If we open the planning needs to be done. If we open another depot, how much turnover are we going to do? It's like you said earlier, Mark. You said, if we was to do X, can we make £2 million profit, So let's work the numbers backwards. So if you're looking at opening a new depot or operating a new depot or depots, you need to know what profit you need from those depots. And then the question then begs, how do we make that profit with these products and these services? Are those products and those services viable in that county or that area or that geographic location? And that should tell you. I think the trouble we've seen in the last 20 years, it's been a fashionable trend to, oh, we're national now. We've got a depot here, depot here, depot there, depot there. And then they say, oh, I don't understand, but depot X is losing money. Well, hold on a minute. There's a reason for that. It's not been planned right, surely.
Well, this is the principle of any small business. When you grow, you open your baker's shop and you make some great cakes, and it's you because you're part of that and you're running that business. And then you decide to open one down the road, and all of a sudden you've now diluted that team, that great team, into two, haven't you? And someone else is now the leader of that one, and and that's what happens with the bigger one. So do you think that, do we think that public companies have become maybe too focused, as you're saying there, on revenue, Mark, and as family ownership become a real advantage now, or let's call it independent ownership, but it is family.
Yeah, I think. You know what? I think the great thing about the family and the independence is they can make decisions and changes almost instantaneously. They don't have to go back to the board, do they, and say, dear board, we would like to change our focus from here to here, or add these new products, or take these products away. A family business will be looking at the P&L. They'll be judging where, the right thing to do is judge the products and where we're making the most profit, or judge the locations or the depots, and then they can make a change. A family business like Gap has said, we actually need a depot here because it will take the pressure off these locations, and because there's demand for these products and services in this geographical area. And then because it's a family decision, it's bought, it's paid for, it's open and it's running. Whereas, a national company has to almost justify it to the board before, and assuming the decision's yes, then they can go away and start the ball rolling to open a new location or a new niche. But the family business already did it 6 months ago.
Yeah, because some of those organisations. Sorry, Mark, I was just going to say, because some of those organisations might be reporting to parent companies abroad or overseas. There's a lot more red tape. There's a lot more, board upon board, management level upon management level that you're trying to cut through. And again, I think, it's down to planning and execution and having a good, sustainable plan in place when you're looking at what Mark here is talking about.
Yeah, and so carrying on with that, what you guys are saying, what we're talking about, we'll just jump back into the report on that exact point here, page 43 for people that want to have. And we asked ourselves a question, and we were saying, look, the biggest what the report's showing in clear, well, I was going to say black and white, but it's lovely bounded colour. The biggest businesses are not always the best. The available evidence suggests the success in the UK plant hire is built on profitability discipline, focused capital allocation and sustainable business model, not on the size of the fleet, not on the number of depots or the impressive revenue alone. And that's what you basically said, Mark. So the central question was, what actually makes a successful plant hire company? It's not the size of the fleet, it's not the number of depots. We've covered that. The report covers that. The available evidence suggests that, and this is probably common sense, but the success is built on profitability, discipline, focused capital allocation, and a business model that generates sustainable returns, not just impressive revenue. And the three areas of financial quality. Revenue is the starting point. We're not saying in the report that revenue isn't the key driver. Revenue tells you how large a business is. It doesn't tell you whether or not the business is financially healthy. Two businesses with identical revenues can have widely different profitability. We know that with different profitability, debt levels, and long-term sustainability. But profitability is the measure. Number two, profit before tax, operating margin and EBITDA margin, reveal how well, I don't actually like EBITDA because it includes depreciation, and you take the depreciation and amortisation out. Well, depreciation to me is a cost. I mean, at the end of the day, it might not be a cash cost. You're not paying cash out, but it's a cost to your business. That product is still depreciating. It is a cost. So I prefer straight EBIT. The capital efficiency is the prize. That's the third rule, isn't it? Return on capital employed. As the report says, and you mentioned ROCE, measures how well a business uses its invested assets. In an industry that requires consistent fleet reinvestment, businesses that generate strong returns on capital are building durable long-term value. That's what the report says. Read that on page 43. So, and there was one little bit else on the report that was which was great. It really breaks down on the next page the myth of size. Revenue rank and profit rank diverge sharply. Speedy Hire is second by UK revenue. That's why you can see that we've spoke about Agreco, because they were more global. They had some sales in there, so we didn't put them. We showed them on the main table at number one and we gave them their scoring, but we took them away when we were looking at rental for the UK, really, like on like. So Speedy is number 2, 416 million, yet a loss making 32 million, while Gap Group fourth by revenue, 326 million. So nearly 90 million less, yet earns 39.5 million at 12.1% margin. And the data suggests, obviously, that business model discipline, not revenue scale, is the primary driver for financial quality of those businesses. And you mentioned Gap in particular. So it's very interesting that the revenue is all over the place, and you go to the following page and you've got Sunbelt, they're making a margin of 9%, great, better than construction, maybe a little bit down. They profit before tax of 45 million, so that they were up there, adequate. They're not overperforming, they're not adequate. Gap were the strong performers, really graded as strong performers at number 4. Revenue driven again, VP and Brandon, who are combined now, Speedy, both at that 400, both small margins. I mean, BP and Brandon just about 6.2%, which is, you don't know what else is going on in the business. It's adequate. It's not top strong performer like Gap. HSS comes below Gap on revenue, and you think about it, they're making minus 10%, a loss of 32.8 million of 300 million turnover, compared to Lynch. Last figures was about 112 million, who are making 15.9%. Now that's an interesting jump, isn't it? When you're looking at like somebody like Lynch, who are outperforming the rest of the competition with a much smaller turnover but a much bigger margin. So a lot of stats there. So transition. So far we've talked about business quality. Get into the, we can't talk all day about everything that's in the report, but go and read it. Quality doesn't happen by accident. We know that. It usually starts with the business model itself. And I do feel that some of those, what you've mentioned, guys, about where we've probably got too big, they bought too many different businesses. I don't think they really know what their model is. They think that they know, but sometimes we've seen some, especially with Speedy, they bought some big businesses, and you could have like a reverse takeover where the influence is from the business that you bought. A bit what happened like with Lang O'Rourke. When O'Rourke's bought Lang, it was kind of like a reverse takeover, because there was more people in Lang than there was ever in O'Rourke. Those who have specialised, some remain family owned, others have embraced asset light strategies. So let's jump on to the next section. Are you still with me? Have you fallen asleep yet, boys?
No, we're not falling asleep. No, we're following you. I was just considering, just on your last point on that report, and I think one of the things that where people go wrong is it's all about having sustained growth, isn't it? It's not about, we look. You talked about Lynch, you talked about VP and HSS. It's all about planning and having a sustained growth. If you're growing for the sake of growing, you might bolt on £100 million worth of turnover, but if that then's going to force you into a loss, then you're in real trouble. What is the actual point of that? You need growth. Everything you do in business, every depot you open, every product you run, every product you cut, the sole purpose needs to be to ensure and deliver profitability. And if what you're doing, any operation in what you're doing in business, if you're not considering the operational profitability, then what are you doing it for?
Absolutely, absolutely. What we do have to ask yourselves is that what we said. Turnover is vanity. They think, well, we're increasing turnover, but that's great if you've got the plan right and you're turning around and saying, look, we're making an investment to grow, so therefore we're going to not show a profitability for the next year. We're going to break even the next year, and then we're going to make profit because we're investing 100 million. There's a different argument, isn't there? But they don't seem to be clear on that. I don't think their staff, when you talk to them, know that either. So I just thought we'd move on quickly. About which model is winning. I know one of the biggest things I took away from the report wasn't actually about the individual company; it was about the business models. That was me. So, which made the business models. What do you think it told us there? On the business model analysis, which is on your run sheet, boys. Hey, on your run sheet.
This is the thing. I think we actually don't know where this is on the sheet.
69 to 75 minutes.
Oh yeah, right. So, I've got it here. So, we've identified 6 broad operating models across the UK plant hire industry. Yeah, you've got general hire, companies offering broad fleets, national coverage, and multiple customer sectors. You've got the specialist infrastructure, businesses focused on sectors such as rail, energy, major infrastructure, utilities, and operated plant. We touched, and this is the next one, is family-owned independents, owner-managed businesses with disciplines, capital allocation, and long-term decision-making. We said that earlier, didn't we, about being able to flex and change. The next one is asset-light managed service providers. Businesses relying more on cross-hire, managed services, customer solutions, rather than simply owning more equipment. You've then got the solution providers, organisations selling integrated services rather than just the equipment, yeah? And then you've got the future hybrid models, combining owned fleet, technology, telematics, digital platforms, outsourced capacity, all depending on customer requirements. But what becomes obvious is that there isn't just one perfect model, yeah? But there are models that currently appear better positioned than others. If we have a look at some of the strengths, you've got people that have got national coverage, large customer bases. You of course got the buying power of those businesses, cross-selling opportunities. But these all come at challenges. The challenges are, and we've discussed some of these: high overheads, depot cost, logistical challenges, large management structures. You mentioned that, Liam, didn't you, about trying to cut through, margin pressures. All these things affect your margins. The specialist operators, they've got some good key strengths: higher margins, technical expertise, customer loyalty, lower competition, strong infrastructure exposure. They've got a smaller addressable market and a sector concentration risk, though. Family-owned businesses, and we've said some of these, haven't we? Faster decisions, long-term investment, strong financial discipline, stable leadership, and a really flexible culture, and that's really important. The asset-light businesses, their strengths are, lower capital employed, they've got lower debt, flexible fleet, and a reduced ownership risk. But their challenges are, margin sharing. They've got less control, and they're a real customer dependency.
Yeah, so what we're really saying is every model has its strengths, but at this moment in time, some models appear structurally stronger than others. Which model surprised you the most? Which model would you want? Perhaps you two guys. What would you choose?
For me, there was two to consider, right? Not one. One was the family-owned business. I really think the strengths there are powerful. And the second one was the specialist operators. And this comes up time and time again, doesn't it? Niches and family. Those two businesses, they're just able to flex and change as time moves forward.
Yeah, because Flannery's are doing the same as they've always done in a way. I mean, there will be a few different specialist bits of equipment that they would buy in, but generally they've kept it the same, but just done more of it, haven't they? Whereas Speedy and Sunbelt, if you're looking on a different higher model, they've just grown by bringing in more and more different challenges and different product ranges, haven't they?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, I think the main takeaway from that really is that when you look at the specialists, they're able to find technology, they're able to find niches in the market, and they're able to start running it. Yeah, they're able to start running it. It's almost like if we look at the introduction of the electric excavators. Yeah, the electric excavators have come in. It's a bit of a niche. People have started running it. They found a market for it. Now they can increase their fleet size accordingly, and that's the key word. They can increase their fleet size accordingly to the customer requirements and the market share that's available.
Just on picking up there, the one that I found interested in that report, which wouldn't interest me if I was going to be a potential business owner, was the asset control, because you're just relying on trying to do a high volume of turnover, a high volume of hires. You're relying on every man, dog, third party out there, and you've got no real control over that business. And I think that's a hard one. So, and again, previously in the past, when I've gone out for certain things and they go, well, I'll just check. And you end up looking at it and you think, okay, well, that tracked dumper isn't coming from who I thought it was coming from. It's been cross-eyed in through someone else, through someone else, through someone else. And actually, there's 3 or 4 of you all on the line. You wonder why it hasn't turned up pre-10 a.m. That's because the communication hasn't gone down through the 3 or 4 people. Because then everybody's trying to make their margin on it. The quality of the kit when it's come out is in a poorer condition than maybe a national player that specialises in track dumpers. You get it on site and you think, okay, well, and then you try and have a conversation about, okay, well, it hasn't turned up till 2 o'clock today. I don't want to be paying the hire until it starts, tomorrow morning. Oh no, we can't do that. We want paying for today. I just think it's potentially, in my view, a recipe for disaster when you're trying to do that. You've got no control over it. I mean, if you can get a winning formula there, but you have got to be doing some numbers, you have got to be doing the volume to try and make any money, but you're not in control of your destiny. And I think sometimes that's a very cautious thing to remember, that if you're not in control of your destiny, you're not in control of the assets, the people, the plant, the staff, you're relying on other people. And we've spoken about in part 1 how sometimes the training isn't there. We've got high staff turnover. The people that are there picking up a paycheck that I've already mentioned. It could be a dangerous game to play. So that one for me was the interesting one to come out on the summary sheet.
I've looked at it and I thought there's a mixture of models. So I looked at it at a different angle. I thought to myself, well, if I'm a contractor now, you know, and this is what I think at the moment. I've dealt with a few, obviously on both sides. I've been a contractor, I've been in hire, and I feel that a lot of the people you deal with in procurement aren't procurement. They're buyers. They're not looking at the production of the site. They're just looking at how cheap they can get it. And yeah, you're paying a little bit more. You mentioned that before with a local supplier, but you're getting value, aren't you? Because they're more committed to that part of of that region, and they've got the experience and local knowledge. I mean, if I'm a contractor now and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, how do I run my procurement? Yeah, I'm looking for national. I want a national hire, but I probably want a national specialist hire company in certain areas. So yes, I'm going to pick a Lynch and a Flannery, possibly to cover the most of my needs on that big groundwork in civil engineering side. But when I'm coming down to my fit out, my small tools and bits and pieces like that, perhaps I'm doing a little bit more procurement and less buying, trying to get a national deal and getting a rebate structure and trying to save money every year to just prove that I can save money, rather than just say, well, working with the site and working with local independent hire companies to deal with some of the smaller kit that give a better service and are more likely to turn up at 7 o'clock in the morning with a brand new piece of kit, with it working. If it breaks down, you know, and as you say, they're not reliant, then you're not reliant too heavily on going through one-stop shop, you know, and you're ended up with a third party, as you said, 3 or 4 down the line. You don't know what you're getting when you're getting it, when it breaks down, who to go to. So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to look at the different models and to see which ones are successes, you know. And I wish everyone that's doing not so good, you know, to do well. But I do feel that a lot of the companies that are doing, it's not the first time we spoke about these companies. A lot of the companies that aren't doing as well are doing not so well because they need to look at their model, and that's what we're trying to say. So yeah, you've answered one of the questions I was going to say, Liam. You know, I was going to put you in the spot and say, you know, what business model actually delivers the best experience. So great, you've covered that off already. But look, I've just said I don't want a one-stop shop, as perhaps. But do you, as an end user, do you prefer the one-stop shop, or do you see a need for it, or do you prefer the independent or the individual purchase, sharing the load, as they say?
I think from a business perspective, you know, if you look at running a business as a contractor and an end user, if you've got the one-stop shop, it's beautiful. If they've got a system and a process in place that all the invoices are all coming in from one, the purchase ledger all marries up. You've probably got a smaller team potentially that you're working with that you can marry up if there is a query on an invoice. Yes, and it is peace of mind sometimes as well with a one-stop shop that, oh, you know, if I've forgotten this or I potentially need that, don't worry, we can add it on the delivery when it comes out. That's brilliant. But sometimes I think when you're a contractor and you're looking for specialist bits of kit or something that you think is going to be able to achieve what you need to achieve in the time frame that you've quoted for, because, you know, from a contractor's point of view, it's all priced work, so you need to make sure you've got the delivery. Sometimes you need to, you know, pay a little bit more, go with someone with a good reputation and you know, a good background. So as I say, I think for me it's a mixed bag. It's looking at, you know, somebody that you can use across a broader spectrum throughout the UK, but also then looking at those more, I mean, I mentioned track dumper earlier, you know, those more bespoke bits of plant and equipment, you might need to go to somebody that specialises in it, might be paying slightly more, but you know what you're getting, you know you're getting the, you know, the kit to the required specification, and you've got the backup reliability and service that all marries up with that.
So do you think then, just to final in this section, you know, do you think that that customers will eventually buy outcomes instead of equipment? Do you think the depots will become smaller? Let's go forward 10 years. Do you think, you know, operators will all become more specialist? Have we seen the end of general hire? Or are we seeing the end of general hire?
I think again, my view is, and we've touched on it a bit throughout today's podcast. That people, the ones that seem to be succeeding, are those with that specialist or niche in the market. You spoke earlier about Ardent. They're having a bit of a rejiggle in what their specialism is. They're going back to their core roots and basics to try and get a model that works for them. So I think, what do they say? You can be a jack of all trades, but sometimes you need to be a master of one, because when you're a master of one, almost then what the ability of what you're able to charge, it becomes irrelevant, because if you've got someone that can deliver that particular product in the time frame to the level that you want to achieve, money becomes irrelevant. I mean, for me, as a contractor, what would I rather have? Cheap and cheerful potentially, but if it breaks down and you haven't got the backup and the reliability, my program goes out the window on a project that I'm running, and all of a sudden, what was £150, £200 cheaper in a week's hire is now cost me thousands of pounds with delays on a project where I've got LEDs if I run late, over something that you might be paying £250, £300 more a week. But when it does go wrong, there's a replacement there within a couple of hours, or there's a fitter on site immediately, or an operator that says, no, hang on a minute, I've had this problem before. It's quite a problem issue with the DPF. Let me just do a manual regen. Up it goes, and away she's running again. So to me, as an end user, as a contractor, it's not all about price point. It is about actually everything that comes as a whole and a collective.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%, Mark.
Yeah, and my message to the contractors out there is like, that old saying your mum used to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sometimes that is the case, but what I notice a lot is that you've got new CEO comes in, he asks questions, how can we do things better? We get new procurement comes in and goes, right, how can we do things better? And their better is normally trying to prove and point score on the previous guy, which normally means cutting the margin, cutting the price off the, and going out to market to get the best price. And it does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it also doesn't take into consideration the actual impact. And I wish more companies would use the data that's available now to them. And I do believe technology is changing plant hire for the better. If you link up with a hire company that's interested in data management, they can show you that utilisation of the product is sometimes better than paying a cheaper price. And working out with the data that's available, is cheaper better, or is paying a little bit more for a better service getting you better production on site? That's where I think we'll make a real impact, because I think we've just not changed the hire industry for as long as I've ever been in it, and people will disagree, but the principles of hire have always been the same. The technology's changed and it's got better. The communication sometimes has got better. The environmental impact is probably getting better. But the basic principle of making a phone call, have you got one of them on a Friday at 5 o'clock, I need it Monday 8 o'clock, hasn't changed. I have got one. Oh, you are going to keep your workshops open for the rest of the weekend to get it ready, but I still only want to pay £500 for something that's worth £700. That hasn't changed, and therefore it's still a race to the bottom, and therefore it becomes a bit of a bun fight, and it's something that needs to change in the industry. I think we're seeing that as the industry. You never notice it when the industry's buoyant, but as we've gone through this real hard period since COVID, really, for the majority of people, there's always one or two companies out there that are doing well. We're really seeing these cracks opening that were there anyway, I think. So let's kind of wrap up from today. We've covered a huge amount today. We've looked at the market, looked at the numbers. The report is for debate. The numbers are the numbers. Just don't criticise us for the numbers. That's what they are. It's black and white, but there's some good modelling information there. There's 150 pages. We've covered 5 or 6, 7 pages. We could be here all week, So what we've got to know is, like, if you're listening as a managing director, a CEO, a business owner, a finance director, what should you actually take away from today's discussion? Because the report only is valuable if it changes the questions we ask ourselves. And that's all we really wanted to do. I don't mind putting that report, someone prints that down, goes to the board meeting on Monday, says, oh, these wankers have done this report, and what do you think? Oh, it's a load of rubbish, throw it in the bin. At least there's a discussion. But hopefully there'll be a discussion to say, do you know what, there's a few points there that we should start looking at our models and how we can make ourselves better. And we want to be profitable. We want our industry to be profitable because that encourages growth. We want them to be excellent. We love our industry, guys, don't we? That's why we're in it. And we want it to be the best industry to come and work for. So, Mark, let's finish off with the biggest. What's the biggest lessons from the report you've taken?
Yeah, well, I think, look, one thing that's become obvious throughout the research on that report is the companies producing the strongest long-term results weren't necessarily doing any revolutionary things. They were just simply doing the fundamentals exceptionally well. Yeah. And if I had to summarize the report into practical advice for CEOs, it'll be the following points. Yeah. Lesson 1, don't ask, did we make a profit? Ask yourself, did every pound invested in fleet actually produce an acceptable return? Measure utilization by category, not just overall fleet. Average utilisation hides the poor performing assets. We said this before, the good stuff is shielding the bad stuff. So every product category should justify its existence. Bit like you said earlier, Mark, a lawnmower's losing money, get rid of them.
Yeah, no loss leader. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
The next lesson, don't chase turnover for the sake of league tables. Bigger revenue doesn't automatically mean stronger business. Lesson 4, we said this, complexity has a cost. Every depot, every product line, every additional management layer, every system, every acquisition, all adds overheads. Challenge whether every element is still earning its place. In the same way you drill down to the product categories. Lesson 5, protect your balance sheet. Strong businesses survive downturns because they have options. Weak balance sheets remove the options. So you cut down too lean, you lean yourself nowhere to go. Lesson 6, technology isn't optional anymore. So you've got telematics, AI, we've done all this on the podcast. Digital customer portals, predictive maintenance, these are becoming these are becoming competitive necessaries, not nice to haves anymore. Lesson 7, and this is the thing, know your business. Know exactly what you're famous for. The highest performing businesses generally have a very clear identity and customers understand exactly why they choose them. Number 8, review every major investment decision. So before you buy more fleet, ask whether the existing fleet could earn you some more. 2 more to go, everybody. Lesson 9, benchmark yourself honestly. Don't compare yourself only with businesses your size. Compare yourself with the actual best operators, regardless of their size. And the last lesson, keep asking difficult questions. The report isn't the answer, it's the start of better conversations. Many of the themes reflected throughout the report's CEO lessons, strategic priorities, emphasis on capital discipline and technology and governance.
Yeah, and I like to go over that number 7. Know exactly what you're famous for. What a great comment there you had. I know if I go to Flannery's, why I'm going to Flannery's, don't I? And maybe, and I feel like I'm digging out Speedy, I've generally not. What do I go to Speedy for? Because I can go to them for everything, can't I, maybe? Training, gas. They've got a managed service, so I can go and get a Flannery's machine from them. It's just so sporadic what I can go from. So I don't really know what their clear identity is anymore. And that's a great point, Mark. Out of all those lessons, that's the one I would take. So, looking back over all 12 businesses, they all have one thing in common, or what's the one thing they have in common? They're all well known to us. I don't know if there's much in common apart from they've got a spat of different types of models, as we've said. Very interesting how many models that was for me there actually was. And we haven't even spoken about the companies out there like Synergy, who are very much that model where they're buying just to put hours on a machine to then sell that machine on, rather than the Lynch and Flannery model, which is to buy, utilise that asset and get the return over a longer period. So that's another episode which we should probably have. Mark and Liam, you know, we spent the last 4 hours, hours, talking about report statistics, business models. Every morning someone opens a depot, answers the phone, loads of transport, repairs machines. You know, what's your biggest takeaway that you've had from the last couple of days? I'll ask that to Liam first, and then you, Mark.
Yeah, so I think my closing remarks would be, I think a huge amount of effort is gone into producing this report, and I think, you know, I tip my hat off to the pair of you and to those also behind the scenes to generate this report. And I think it's, you know, it's eye-opening, it's refreshing, and I think there's a lot more to be discussed about it. And I think, you know, if there's people out there that have listened to this podcast and they think, oh, that's triggered something within their heads, you know, continue to drop the comments in on the box below, continue to write back in with your feedback, because the more we get as a podcast, the more then we can build those episodes around it. And I think, you know, we've really, over the last 2 podcasts within the 4-hour special, we've really only touched the tip of the iceberg in relation to the plant hire sector. I think there's a lot more discussion that needs to be had. I think for me, in summary, some of what was on there, I kind of knew through working in and around the industry previously and now being a contractor. Some of it in there was eye-opening, and it's made me sort of take note and stance and thought, oh, do you know what? And I think the other thing is, finally for me, is it's made me maybe ask some questions next time I go to look at pricing or tendering a job, and maybe who I might be looking to partner up with. Because again, sometimes what you see on the outside of a book, what do they say, don't judge a book by its cover, and what you have on the inside are 2 completely different things.
Lovely. So,
I think,
yeah,
you know, from me, I think it begs a question. This is my biggest takeaway. It begs a question reading that report. How well do you know your business, and do you know where it's going? Right. And there's a follow on from that is, if the market was to change in terms of recessions, COVIDs, or all sorts of things that we have, if the market was to change, do you have a plan B or a backup plan? And I think it's really, really interesting to read about the different business models. Yeah, it's really interesting to see the profitability of some that you wouldn't generally think were as high as they are. And I think, as Liam said, and as you said as well, Mark, the takeaway for me is, ask yourself more questions about your existing business, and like you said, Mark, what are you famous for? Where are you going? Yeah, these are really important questions.
so quick fire round then before we shout out. You know, just one. We can all answer these together. So just wrote down a few questions. Just, you know, out of all of that with the report, and it doesn't have to come from. It can come from either one of you. Together you could agree, whatever, and we could all agree. What's the best business model you saw there?
For me, the family-run independent.
I agree. That's where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah, some generalisation is going out the window. You know, what was the most impressive company, or one that surprised you, maybe?
I was impressed with Agreco, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know much about them, to be honest. I've never really had many dealings with them, so yeah, that probably was.
They were just right up there.
Yeah, they weren't on my
Yeah.
radar before reading the report.
Well, for someone that covers a big scope of products and is more of a generalist compared to Agreco as a specialist, Gap was my one that stood out. Obviously, very impressive and great to see a company that's been going for such a long time, family run. So that was the best model, as you said, you know, and really doing well there. What was the biggest industry opportunity you thought from the report? Where should people be heading in their is it technology, or what should they do? What's a must?
think it's a niche. It's certainly finding a niche within the market, but I do believe that technology is changing so fast now that if you can incorporate a niche and technology, because customers want data now, that's the big thing. So technology means data, doesn't it? So if you've got a niche and technology, I think that's where it's going to go, isn't it?
So is there anyone so obviously not everyone's mentioned in the report. You know, we'll probably hopefully we might do an annual one. You know, is there anyone, do you think, that won't be, if we just said that was the 12, and do you think anyone out there, they're all going to be the same? Is there anyone that you know in the industry that we haven't mentioned that you'd think, oh, they're going to be up the list next year because they're doing really well? Is there anyone out of mind, you know?
I think your man Ricky's company, I think they're really starting to grow. Higher Man, yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing really well. They're opening depots. They've got a real good tool R model, actually. I've spoke to clients of mine that use those guys for tools, and you know, it's all about the service, isn't it? You said that, didn't you? It's not about the price. They seem to have a good service model, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them moving up the list. Yeah.
Well, I won't tell them exact figures. It's not for me to say, but I do know that with only, I say only, but with I believe an 8% revenue growth, they've had the most profitable, and I'm talking about 60 odd percent increased profitability in the business, that company this year. So doing very well. So the model there is, I think, consistency in leadership. You know, they know what their focus is. They're not trying to bend out or shape too far to meet what they're trying to do. They've got into, I think the only real change I think they've done is in the last few years they got into a little bit of powered access, but smaller end powered access. They're not buying big booms. They're not trying to go and compete. And powered access is something that we really kind of looked at and touched out, but some of those big eye companies out there are complete basket cases at the moment. Not a great industry, to be honest with you. Some of them are doing okay, and they're doing okay, and we'd like to hear from those who are doing really well, and maybe come on and tell us why they're doing so well compared to some of your competitors. And even the ones, the big ones, I wouldn't mind having someone on telling me what you're going to do to change that model, because that's a price to the bottom, definitely, and perhaps an oversaturation of products. But look, it brings us to the end of what's been a fascinating discussion. Really has been back and forth. We had a few technical issues, but I'm sure we'll cut and edit all them out, you know. I'd like to thank Mark and Liam for taking the time to work through the report. You know, it's a Sunday after the Saturday after the football, so we're a bit tired, you know, trying to do 4 or 5 hours of this, and you know, challenging some of the conclusions as well. You know, the report is there for the debate, and that's what it's intended to do. You know, it isn't about proving that digging deep has all the answers. That's not. We're just here. We just talk about it. We have something we enjoy doing. It's about saying it's definitely not saying that one company is as good as another, and this one's a bad company. You know, the people that are in the bottom have been some of the leaders and pioneers in our industry. Fabulous companies over the years with Speedy and HSS. You know, they're ones that you know. If you said, name me 10 high companies, O2 would definitely be in there. But they're obviously having some difficult situations at the moment. It's about how their leadership, it'd be interesting to know how their leadership is going to turn that around. Are they going to look at the stuff that's not really for them anymore and move on and become more specialist? That would be fascinating to see in 5 years if we come back and see Speedy were more specialist and strategically aligned to where they feel they want to be, rather than being a jack of all trades. And it was all about just asking better questions. We had some real lead up to some debate on this show with different things, and contractors and independents versus major car companies, and we went into sales reps, and now that's changing. Some real good debate. So this is like just coming to the end of that real real seasoned, really. But like every industry, we improve when we're prepared to challenge our own thinking. That's got to be said. If today's discussion has made you think differently about utilisation, capital allocation, technology, business models, or simply how you measure success, then we've achieved exactly what we set out to do. We generally love to hear your thoughts. Which conclusions do you agree with? Which ones do you disagree with? Which companies do you think deserve better recognition? That's a good one. I'd like to hear from all your hire companies. Come on and tell us what model you use, why you're doing successfully. The only person, real hire company, funny enough, that didn't make it, we had on was a guy came on and trying to change the industry himself. Steve Skeets, remember Mark? And their company unfortunately didn't make it. But why didn't they make it? What was going on there? What was his model that didn't work? How can we learn from that rather than, oh yeah, they didn't make it because of this or that? How do we learn from that? So download the report, read it yourself, challenge it, discuss it with your leadership team, and let us know what you think, because this isn't the end of the conversation, it's the beginning. So you can download the report, as I said, at diggingdeep.co.uk. It's on the front page, or you can go to the report section. You can go diggingdeep.co.uk/reports if you're really that fancy. And thanks for listening, and thanks for guys for helping me out today, Mark and Liam. It's been a pleasure, as always.
No problem.
Thank you, Mark. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everybody.
Lovely. Cheers, boys.
The opinions expressed within this podcast are solely the individuals and do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the sponsors or its affiliates.